Hey folks, this is Kyle Wilkinson with Ellensburg Angler. On today's episode of the fly tying series, we'll be tying a CDC Emerger. This is a great pattern to imitate an emerging caddis, an emerging mayfly, any of those smaller insects as they are hatching and becoming an adult. This can be fished by itself. It's a little hard to see in the water column. It is going to sit right in or just below the surface film. Or it can be fished with a larger fly, maybe behind a chubby Chernobyl or behind a larger adult caddis like an elk hair caddis or a fluttering caddis. This sits really low in the surface film and it's a great emerger pattern for those smaller insects when the fish are a little bit picky. And since it is a little bit of a lower profile, sometimes those picky fish will come after this fly more so than they would a higher riding emerger pattern. This is going to be a pretty simple tie. It's only going to take you a couple minutes and you can really crank these out in a bunch of different sizes and a bunch of different color patterns. Today I'm going to be tying it on a size 14 dry fly hook. I've already smashed the barb and I've put it in the vise. And you're really only going to need three materials. You need your thread, you're going to need some dubbing, and you're going to need some CDC. I'm just going to be using my 8/0 black unit thread for this fly today. And I'm going to start by tying my thread on right behind the eye and working it back towards the bend of the hook. I'm going to trim my excess here. And again, you can tie this in different colors. You can tie them in a brown or a gray, a green. You can even tie them in a yellow or a cream to imitate a PMD. This is just a very versatile pattern that can be tied in numerous colors and numerous sizes. For today, I'm just going to be using some natural dun. This is more of a grayish kind of cream color CDC. And then I'm going to be matching that with a brown colored hare's ear dubbing. So I'm going to take out a piece of my CDC here. I'm going to lay it on top of the hook shank so that the tips are facing backwards. I'm going to just tie my CDC feather onto the top of my hook just like this. Few turns to anchor that CDC feather on the hook, and then I'm going to take my scissors, and you can see here you've got this stem. I'm going to cut just the tip of this stem off. And you'll see here in a second how it releases some of these fibers. So now we've got a few more open fibers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these fibers facing towards the front of the hook. I'm going to flip them over and lay them back. And I'm just going to anchor that down. It's going to look something kind of like this. I'm going to take another CDC feather. I'm going to repeat that exact same process. This feather isn't quite as long, so I'm probably just going to lay it over the top and anchor it down. So it's going to look something about like that. So you've got a large tuft of CDC, and what that does in the surface film is it catches an air bubble, and it looks just like an insect that's trying to emerge on the surface that has that air bubble trapped as it's coming up and rising to eventually become an adult. So I'm just gonna capture all those stems of the CDC in there, give myself a fairly even body with my tying thread. So again, that's what it's gonna look like right there. From there, I'm gonna take my brown hare's ear dubbing and I'm just gonna dub it right onto the tying thread. All I'm going to do is make a nice even body towards the front of the fly, towards the eye of the hook. It's going to look something like that. I'm going to put just a little bit more dubbing on here. All right, So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put another CDC feather, I'm going to tie it in here. I'm going to have it laying out to be about the same length as the tail. Alright, so I have my feather here. I'm just going to lay it down on top of the fly and have it be about the same, like maybe not quite as long as the tail, maybe halfway down the tail for this particular fly. I'm just going to capture this over the top of the hook or the top of the body so it looks just like this. I'm going to go ahead and cut the stem off here. And then I'm just going to wrap my thread over what was left over that stem. So that's what it's going to look like. We've got a piece of CDC on top and we've got a fairly thick tail. I'm going to go ahead and take another little pinch of this dubbing and I'm going to dub right here where I have this big bunch of thread right behind my hook eye. I'm just going to dub that right on the tying thread and I'm going to wrap it right over that top of that stem. Make sure it's all captured down there pretty well. I'm going to wrap right back here behind the eye. I'm going to throw in a couple set of whip finishes. Cut my tying thread and you are done. That is the CDC Emerger. It's a super easy tie, super quick tie. You can crank these puppies out in just a couple minutes each. You can tie them in a bunch of different colors and a bunch of different sizes to imitate different types of insects. This will be a really good pattern to imitate an emerging March brown here in the next couple of weeks on the Yakima River once the fishing opens back up. It'll also be a great pattern to imitate an emerging caddis here on the Yakima in the next couple of months. And it's a really good mayfly pattern I found out at Rocky Ford. When you see fish rising just below the surface, you can't really see the adult that they're rising to. I've tied on one of these and I've done pretty good up there. So it's a very versatile pattern, tying a variety of colors to imitate a variety of insects. So again, this fly pattern is going to be a little bit difficult to fish by itself. As a dry fly pattern, it is going to sit just on the surface film, in the surface film, or slightly below it. So it is going to be a little bit harder to see. So if you're going to fish this fly, fish it behind another dry fly that you can see. Maybe a larger chubby Chernobyl, maybe a adult caddis pattern like an elk-hair caddis or a fluttering caddis, or maybe behind a purple haze or a parachute Adams. Some kind of dry fly that you can see on the surface, and looking for rises behind that fly or around that fly that might be on this particular pattern. It's very productive because it sits so low on the surface film, but that also makes it much more difficult to see. Before I would fish this fly, I would put just a little bit of floating on it, some kind of liquid floating to keep it riding fairly high, and then every few casts hitting it with some kind of powdered floating to make sure that it is riding in or slightly below the surface film. Thank you for watching today's episode of the fly tying series. We hope you are all staying safe and healthy during these times. Please subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. Hit the little notification bell. It'll notify you when one of these fly tying videos uploads. Also make sure to follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. Thank you.